Hey everyone, thanks for being here. Sam, I was going to ask if you would be interested and willing to lead the meeting and get us through these findings and recs.
I would be delighted. It's my reason for living.
Thanks,
Good morning,
Sam.
everyone. The focus of today's meeting is to get as much fidelity and consensus surrounding the findings and recommendations document, because that your findings and recommendations, along with the other 4 subcommittees, will be rolled up into a master document and go out tonight to the entire work group. And tomorrow morning, there will be what we're calling a crosswalk document that takes key findings and key recommendations and puts together a chart that says where they might, a similar topic may be treated differently by subcommittee 19 versus subcommittee 20. And so we can triage the discussion tomorrow afternoon with those in mind. So I think we should, Daniel, share your screen with the actual document that we will be working on, and we will, and if you can make that as big as you can for us, and maybe it already is, and we would go through these and just fine tune this document. So before I just jump in with that plan for today, do any of the members have any process comments, suggestions for improvement to the process for our tasks this afternoon? Excuse me, this morning.
Hey, Sam, this is Bill. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Just a quick question to ensure that I'm referencing the appropriate version, because I know I like to follow it off to the side. Sometimes it's a little hard to read in this format here in Zoom,
Right.
But I know that Daniel sent a version out last night at 9:29 p.m. And in pulling that up, unless I missed something sent out this morning, it does not look the same as what you're showing.
Yeah, Bill, I can speak to that briefly. So it's the same exact document. The only difference is I copy and pasted this comment from Paul in here.
Okay.
Mainly, it's not a finding and recommendation, but it relates to whatever finding and recommendations have. So I just wanted to make sure we capture it in the conversation. So it's more for note taking, but everything else is identical to what you received at 9:30 last night.
All right. Thank you.
All right. So is the proposal here under Paul's February 21? Are we okay with the global find and replace, or whatever that feature is called, with the tonnage cap, franchise, watershed? Anyone have any objections to those issues? Mark?
Sorry to start out, but I would like to have a more in-depth conversation about the proposal to remove the term tonnage cap and change it to 2020 intake limit. So that doesn't have to be now. It's talked about later in the findings, but I would say I'm not in agreement with that recommendation.
Okay, so Paul, these are your suggestions. So why don't you drive and start off, please?
All right. Is my audio coming across okay?
Perfect.
All right. So Daniel and I spent a lot of time talking about the tonnage cap, and I think a strict reading of the 2020 franchise agreement leads one to wonder exactly what that phrase means in the document. But I think one of Mark's points here is that tonnage cap is more of the anecdotal reference. It's more of a commonly understood term. And so that's why I listed these as suggested global replacements. I think from an engineering, strictly legalistic standpoint, we should use the 2020 intake limit because I think we can define that independently of the franchise agreement. However, as long as we define what we mean by tonnage cap in our document, I think it would probably read better. I think it would probably be more understandable to our audience rather than the more complicated, uncertain 2020 intake limit. So I'm absolutely open to being persuaded on that. And again, I think the definitions that we need to insert into our document early on and prominently can strictly define what we mean by tonnage cap, and that will mean the 1.1 million tons per year limit that's defined in the franchise agreement. So I'm certainly willing to be persuaded on that one. In terms of the franchisee, this was in response to a comment that Ginger had made. We often refer to franchisee here just to kind of keep it more general, but if Republic Services wants and everybody else agrees, we could specifically mention them or VLI. And then the final one is waste shed to service area. Daniel might want to comment on that. I think our Board of Commissioners are used to hearing waste shed strictly in terms of the Benton County waste source footprint, if you will. And usually in the document, when we refer to that, we mean the entire contributing area that flows into Coffin Butte. And so all I'm saying here is we just want to be careful in how we use these terms, and I'm absolutely open to defining them in the beginning of the document, and then as long as we're consistent, that's fine.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Paul. I was thinking, because we're wanting to gravitate to a specific term, I think this would be the perfect location in the document to provide a definition so that as the reader progresses forward, they understand fully the reference. My thought is, since we gave two options here, Valley Landfills Inc. is the legal entity. So from a legal perspective, I think that might be the best. I just don't want that to draw confusion.
All right, well, let's take them one at a time here and see. So I think what's going to happen here is that these different terms, tonnage cap versus intake limit, we have whatever is the term defined in the franchise agreement. We also have the common understanding of the term. And if I'm tracking this issue correctly, what's below the surface here is really an argument about, was there a violation several years ago? And I don't want that issue. I don't want shorthand references, cap and intake limit, to be those definitions to be the surrogate for that issue. We need real clear definitions. And I don't know if someone, if Daniel, somewhere else in the document, are these terms defined elsewhere such that we should put them up here? So we're looking at the definition under each of these two things before we pick cap versus limit.
So just a quick correction, Sam. The kind of definition that you were talking about had to do with our use of limit versus threshold in reference to the 2000 agreement. It seems like we've taken care of that. That's not on the list here. but now we're just talking about 2020 franchise agreement. I don't think there's any dispute over whether or not that's a limit. So the trick here is whether or not we're going to use the phrase tonnage cap, which may or may not just be limited to the 75,000 tons guaranteed to Benton County on the franchise agreement versus 2020 intake limit, which might better match the franchise agreement. And if we're talking about the audience being the Board of Commissioners eventually, it might be worth leaning into what's actually written in the franchise agreement versus what might be more generally known to the public. But yeah, I don't think there's any real dispute behind any of these phrases. It's really just for clarity, and correct me if I'm wrong there, Paul.
Yeah, I agree. So Daniel, you're the one who originally raised the concerns, what I would call the technical concern about tonnage cap. Do you feel that if we define that in this report and just use that term throughout as a stand-in for the 1.1 million ton per year limit, is that unacceptable to you? Because I think that would be more readable.
I mean, I don't think it's unacceptable. I think it would be, I think it would be worth not doing based on this making it to the Board of Commissioners and them being more familiar with the document that we're referring to. But yeah, I mean, I don't generally, I think if it's defined, it won't matter a ton. I just want to be as accurate as possible.
Mark?
Yeah, so I think this is I'm the one who's raising the issue. I agree that it has nothing to do with the 2000 threshold limit discussion that we're that's not why I'm raising it. I'm simply raising it because the term tonnage cap is what is used in the franchise agreement. It's both used in the heading for section 5 of the franchise agreement, and it's also used multiple times in section 5B, where it is referred to directly as a tonnage cap. It is the term that people have been hearing for some period of time. And I think I don't quite understand the push to have some nuanced changing of the terminology here. It's what's in the franchise agreement. I think it's what we should be using here to be consistent. Yeah, when you read the language in the franchise agreement, there's some portion of the tonnage cap that's reserved for Benton County, but that just gets people off into rabbit holes. It's 1.1 million tons. That's the tonnage cap. It's how it's worded in the franchise agreement. That's what I think we should use here.
Yeah, just a quick correction. That's not how it's worded in the franchise agreement.
I have it right here, Daniel.
Reading.
No, I'm sorry. I have it right here. So here, section 5 on page 7 of the agreement says the title is Impact of Solid Waste Volume, semicolon, limit on solid waste, semicolon, tonnage cap. And then in 5B, it goes on specifically to talk about the total tonnage of solid waste and refers to it as the tonnage cap in 2 or 3 places in that second paragraph. So it does say tonnage cap. It doesn't say whatever this new nuanced term is here. I don't understand why we're getting into these nuances.
Well, no, thanks, Mark. I definitely get that it says the words tonnage cap. It was just in relation to the 1.1 million tons and where it shows up in that paragraph beneath the title. That's what Paul and I were talking about on a close reading. We realized that tonnage cap might just be referring to the 75,000 tons, while the limit on solid waste applied to the 1.1 million tons. That's why there's 2 semicolons separating those 2 titles. Again, I don't care a ton about how this shows up though. It was really just for clarity and factuality of what's showing up in that agreement. But if we define it, I don't think it will make a huge difference. So I don't want to spend too much time on this.
So, first of all, when you said you don't care a ton, was that intentional play on words or?
It was.
Okay, thank you. Good job. Chuck, let's hear from you.
Where I'm just careful a little bit here is when you say 2020 intake limit, are you referring genetically to that year? Because are there other franchise agreements that come out some other place? So that, it's generic there, but now you're talking specific 2020.
Yeah, Chuck, this is the limit that is defined in the 2020 franchise agreement. It's pretty clearly spelled out there.
Is there, okay, so if one wants a reference to another historical franchise agreement, how do you declare what that is and use the year of that franchise agreement? I'm just looking, stuff jumps around from year to year, and I want to be specific on one thing.
All right, so there were two threshold/limits. One was defined in the year 2000 in that franchise agreement. We've agreed to call that a threshold. That's the one that was exceeded in 2017 through 2019. And then in the 2020 franchise agreement, this limit was defined as flat 1.1 million tons per year. They are two separate things. One of them is historical, the other is actively currently bearing.
So the connotation is 2020, I guess, or it donates 2020. If on a reference to another one, then I'll use that year intake limit. Is that the convention?
The limit defined in the 2020 franchise agreement is flat. It does not change from year to year. It's a flat 1.1 million tons of intake per year. Does that make sense?
Yes, when you say it that way, it does.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so we got to get through this. What is the you need to put in a definition here, and then land the plane. So, whether we use tonnage cap or intake limit, what is the definition you're going to put here on this space in the document?
The definition is going to be as specified in the 2020 franchise agreement, which is 1.1 million tons per year of solid waste intake into Coffin Butte landfill, exclusive of fire, flood, force majeure, whatever all the other qualifiers were that are clearly spelled out there.
And that is defining the term tonnage cap.
I think Paul's text is accurate.
What part of his text is accurate? We're trying to figure out, are we using tonnage cap or intake limit?
I think we should use what's specified in the 2020 franchise agreement.
And that apparently, according to Mark, is the term tonnage cap. Can we agree on? Is that correct, Republic?
Yeah, that's a legal document.
If it's in the legal document that we signed, then that's the verbiage we should be using.
Okay, so the proposal on the table is we're not changing tonnage cap to 2020 intake limit. And we've defined tonnage cap, so we've got through that one, correct? Any opposition to that? Hearing and seeing none, that's the term. Franchisee.
This was just a personal thing for me. I didn't know why we just wouldn't refer to ourselves by our name and why we were putting franchisee in there. The group feels like it makes sense, then go for it. But you can call us Republic Services or Valley Landfill Inc. because that's our name.
I gotta figure out what to say.
So as I understand what's going on here, other than a preference, is there are distinctions between Republic Services Inc. or Valley Landfills Inc. And you should have it clear. Who signed the franchise agreement?
It's Valley Landfill, so it should be Valley Landfills.
Landfill.
Valley
Yeah,
landfills.
Valley landfill.
Okay, so
sorry, different
franchise
language.
equals valley landfills. And the question then is, do you want to substitute the word valley landfills versus franchisee? And does anyone object to calling it what it is, Valley Landfills Inc.? They signed it instead of
Yeah.
using the word franchisee.
Yeah, that's what I stated previously. I agree with Mark and Ginger here. And I hope the county is in agreement here, is that, if we're tying definitions and referencing a legal document,
It's a
then
no-brainer.
we should be consistent with those terms. Now, do we have to define Valley Landfills Inc. as, and this is in relation directly to the landfill. So if there's any other reference to any other services that we are providing within this document, then maybe we look at a different reference. Then maybe it is just Republic Services. But in this regard, with the landfill, I think we refer to Valley Landfills Inc. because that's what it's been since we've owned it.
I agree. Valley Landfills Inc. is the owner operator of Possum Butte Landfill.
Okay, so for purposes of the landfill, the term franchisee equals Valley Landfills Inc. But because in other, and I don't know if it's in this document we have on the screen, it could be Republic in other circumstances. So are there other references beyond the landfill in this document we have?
I don't recall any. I think it's all about the landfill. But
Okay.
I think it is
I
too.
think,
I'd have to go back and look, but
yeah,
I
I
think
think just following Bill's advice, if we stumble on something that might more appropriately be worded Republic, then we can just change it there. But I think it's Valley Landfills for the bulk of what we're doing here.
Okay, so we'll do a find and replace with the word franchisee and substitute Valley Landfills Inc. Next up, watershed versus service area.
Waste shed.
So what is the what does the document say? The actual franchise, what term does it use?
This doesn't show up in the franchise agreement. It's a state report that they do it by waste shed, and waste shed means Benton County. So using the word waste shed in this document is not conducive to talking about the area that the landfill gets materials from.
Okay, so do you have is it sometimes you use the word waste shed and sometimes you use the word service area?
No, only in specific circumstances when referring to waste in Benton County only, from the state reporting that we do. So the suggestion here is to change that to service area, which is how it's used throughout the document.
Any objection to that? Paul, are you comfortable with that? Well, that was just your change, so obviously you're comfortable with your own work. Any objections?
Just a question, not an objection. We don't have service area defined anywhere though, do we, in this document or anywhere else? Because there is no defined service area. There's just customers.
I think that's correct.
Yeah, my proposal, Mark, would be we do define it in terms of how we're going to use it in this document.
Okay.
So let's put on the screen, what are the magic words here, Paul, that define, quote, service area, unquote?
Total geographic area from which waste feeds into Coffin Butte landfill. Does anybody object to that? Bill, comments?
I defer to Bill.
I'm just reading it again. Yeah, I'm not opposed to that.
Okay.
I mean, this isn't my area of expertise, but I'll chime in.
Okay. Chuck?
I just have one comment. Total graphic area to me refers not only Benton County, but an aggregate of counties and municipalities. Where, I mean, that's your total geographic area that's going into Coffin Butte, if I understand it.
I think this term on the piece of paper includes what you just said, because that geographic area will do counties, cities, unincorporated areas, you know, all the whole thing. I think it seems fine. Great. We've gotten through the first half of the first page in 25 minutes. We're knocking them dead. So let's get to these findings here. We'll come back to the organization if there's some flow level. We just got to nail them going forward. And I really want us to be as judicious as possible. This isn't your last shot at it, but your last shot for tomorrow's meeting. So good enough should be our goal here. So, you know, really fine tune edits, not so much. All right. And any objections to F, whatever that number is going to be?
So
I don't think it makes sense.
there's many different versions here, right? There's like
I don't know.
five different versions of this.
So the very top one, the only things that have multiple versions that I found have an A, B, C, D next to them. The ones without an A, B, C, D, I did not have a differentiated version that I could find. So this one at the top stands alone currently.
Oh,
What are we
okay.
trying to say there? Because currently operates the landfill's demand, supply, and equilibrium of refuse disposal doesn't make sense to me.
I wrote that and I found, you know, I kind of put it together as just a generic landfill. In other words, not only Coffin Butte, but the dynamics is within what we call a linear economy model. And it's defined more as you go down what a linear economy model is versus what we're bridging to a circular economy model.
Okay.
So
So this isn't specifically for Coffin Butte. This is referring to landfill generally. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And I always say, you know, if it fits this landfill, it fits that landfill, so it's generic.
Landfill longevity.
Yeah, I agree with Ginger that this definition is, well, she didn't say this, but I'll say it. It's obtuse to me. It's not a simple definition for the average public reader. You know, because what's meant by landfill reserve resources? I think I know what that means, but I don't know. If there were a simpler definition, that would be I think beneficial.
Are you just saying you want to call it landfill resources then?
No, I don't know, Chuck. I guess I don't know. I stumbled on this and I didn't spend the time, and I'm sorry for that. I didn't spend the time to develop an alternative set of language that I know Sam would be happy if I had something to propose, but I don't at this point. It's just it was just a little too dense, I think, for the average public reader.
Is the goal here to define remaining landfill life?
I think we need to define that in the document, Bill.
I mean, well, then I think we need to add the term remaining as it relates specifically to this document, specifically to Coffin Butte Road, right? We're not talking about, you know, the original I mean, heck, we can go back way back, right? What relates to this site, because there's been waste in the footprint for a very long time. Now things have changed over time. You know, I'm going to give you guys my 2 cents from a landfill engineering perspective, because it ties to our permitted capacity. And so, you know, I don't look at the, sure, I think a factor that feeds into the landfill life, Chuck, has to tie in with part of what you state in your definition. I tend to agree with Mark here that it's confusing to your average reader. I mean, we've been hammering away on this for quite some time.
Okay, I mean, we'll answer this, Bill. You have the whole disposal site, but the landfill site is fundamentally dependent on the disposal site that has reserves. So if you say tied to the permitted capacity, that doesn't take in added reserves that you may expand to later, is what I was trying to say in a landfill.
Yeah, but we can't reference those as you are referring to them as reserves. I legally can't even reference that because it's not a part of a permitted footprint. I have to look at what is available from Coffin Butte today. I can't, and this gets into the what if scenarios, right? Hey, what if, right?
Yeah, what I wasn't trying to be quite specific to Coffin Butte, because usually sometimes you kind of need a generic definition. Otherwise everybody goes off on tangents. And so I tried to make the biggest umbrella there to anybody in under that umbrella then stands and so forth. So if you want to say landfills remaining resources, but usually when I get into resources, there's other resources out there too, so it doesn't negate other resources. But I was just trying to get to the landfill reserve for resources, which may be across the road or what other lands that you have that have the potential, not saying they will, but have the potential of being resources for the landfill.
Yeah.
All right, time out, guys. Time out. This is getting us nowhere. I'm not diminishing the importance of the issue. I'm going to drive to get us through this issue, and we'll live to fight another day. This is not a finding. This is a definition. And so so what we need to do is remove this from a finding. And if you look in the chat, we've got a Ken Ginger back and forth that I think is getting us closer to an operative definition of landfill life. And I think we need to leave it at that, a version of that for now in the definitions, and then get right to what people are really interested on is, you know, what Tuesday in the year 2064 is the thing going to be shut down? So can we, you and Ken, jump in here, please. You the first to give language that could work for a definition.
Sure. Well, something like landfill life, parentheses, longevity, is remaining landfill, life. I've just defined it by itself. That's not good. But the time available to fill permitted landfill airspace with refuse disposal in a linear economy model. So I just agree with Sam. I think we're talking about a definition, which it doesn't necessarily, I don't know if that's a finding or not. I'm not sure exactly what constitutes a finding.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it is a definition. We're going to treat it as such just because we absolutely have to move on. And Ginger, did you have some friendly amendments to that? Oh, I guess Bill has some things here too.
Yeah, I
think
mean,
it's talked elsewhere in the document about what contributes to site life, and that's 3 factors: permitted airspace, the volume or tonnage of the waste deposited, and the density of that waste. Bill is more of the engineering expert than I am, but I'm just looking to try to get something that encapsulates what both Chuck and I think Ken are trying to get at in a simplified term.
yeah, from the perspective of a definition, and that's what I was thinking about, and I typed this off to the side before I copy and pasted it in, but we're trying to provide a definition that is clear to the reader. And we can modify this as necessary, but remaining landfill life longevity is the available timeline a landfill will remain open to accept waste placement into its permitted capacity.
Anyone object to that? It seems good to go to me.
Once that is exhausted, the site has to close.
Okay.
I mean,
never, an old lawyer saying is never keep talking when you won the argument. Just stop. So let's copy and paste that up above into the definition, remove all the other stuff, and start with this EOL 2013 to the present. And so what you're saying here is we have alternative versions of this?
Correct. We have an A, B, and C for this. So there's 3 versions, and we have a fair amount of notes associated with the different versions. But I guess I think we need to go fast. So I would suggest that somebody just choose which version they like the most and start the conversation that way, versus us going one by one through each version.
Well, before we do that, I mean, I got to get focused if I'm going to have to facilitate this discussion. What I'm concerned about is how can we, there's like 3 different dates, 64, 53 to 62. I'm 74. I mean, are we at a stage that we're still arguing over which of these year ranges are more accurate?
Sam, I think that part of the challenge here was that we were initially conflating EPA data versus the annual tonnage report, and the county and Republic Services believe the annual reports submitted to the county are the most accurate. And I believe if you go into finding C, that is the one that Paul rewrote based on the annual report, which we believe to be the most accurate. Is that correct, Paul? Is that where that rewrite in finding C is, 2003 EOL?
Finding C is complicated, Ginger, by the fact that the initial 2003 numbers I used here were from the 2003 CUP document, not from the annual report. So okay. If you want a clean Coffin Butte annual report to Coffin Butte annual report kind of number, I think B is probably the best answer there, as I understand it.
And I added B just based off of Ginger's comment about needing annual report to annual report data. So I just collected that from the annual report data we have for 2013.
And so I'm
Bill,
proposing
does that work for you?
So unless anyone objects, we're using B is what I'm understanding.
Yeah, that's fine, Sam. I do have a comment as it relates to how the numbers are reflected. You know, again, for our reader, I don't think they need to know 39.81 years. I think we just say 40 to 49 years. And then in the last sentence, I think we just change it to, 14 to 16 years. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean,
You can
unless
ask for,
anyone of,
yeah, you can ask
We're
for a
not-
vote on it. That's my comment.
okay.
So,
So
so that,
go ahead,
yep.
Mark.
Yeah, so I was just gonna weigh in that in C, I think there is important information there. I'm not sure why we would only limit ourselves to the annual report, since the 2003, that PC 0311 was very specific. I looked at it this morning. It is quite detailed in terms of what was being proposed with regard to that inclusion of the East Triangle at that time. So I guess if and I think part of the discussion we've had previously is some concern about the changing projected useful life of the landfill, and putting it only looking at 2013, as we do in B, sort of discounts what was previously said in 2003. So if we could add them together some way, I mean, it's
So-
not like it's not an EPA document. It is a county document. It is a document that was submitted by Valley Landfills. So I think it has the same credibility as an annual report. It was their application. I would appreciate if we could put them both in.
So Mark, just a comment here, that East Triangle, that I understand it was put into the document 2003. That later, shortly after I started with Coffin Butte, we later determined that proposed location for waste placement was not a stable location from an engineering stability perspective. And so as the state mandated that we reevaluate all of the landfills in the state of Oregon, based on a heightened seismic evaluation, we removed that Eastern Triangle. So I know that's getting into the weeds, but we're referring to an amount of airspace that was included in a document that wasn't properly vetted, in my opinion, back in those days.
That doesn't make it complicated, Bill.
Yeah.
Because because I know later in the document there's more discussion of, well, it had 2003 and then it jumped to 2004 and how many cubic yards and all that sort of stuff. That makes it complicated. Yeah, so I do think from a public accountability standpoint, one of the things that we have discussed is this the changing remaining useful life of the landfill over time, and this certainly is part of that history. So I'm not sure how to manage the fact that later it was actually not developed, and maybe you could say that here, that but I don't know. I'm sorry. It's
All right, so let me drive a possible, go ahead, Paul.
So I want to carry forward Mark's comment here just a little bit, and that is, I believe the 2003 CUP, where the East Triangle was approved, was the last time the county government and the public saw a conditional use permit request that passed, that was approved to expand the landfill. We didn't realize that space was not utilized, but my point here is this was the last reference, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that we had as a public, as a community, in terms of an official size estimate at a major milestone, a junction point in the landfill.
So I think the path forward is do as Daniel has done, is put them in chronological order. So we start with 2003, and then I think you can have two different findings, Daniel. I think you have a 2003 finding and a 2013 finding. And then what's missing is the 20 years later part, right?
Well, if we have two findings, I think we capture both of those by just leaving these the way they're proposed.
Okay, so let's look at it.
B talks about 2013. And then C talks about 2003 as Paul proposed it.
Okay, so all I'm suggesting is just put them, 2003 goes first. And then you talk about 2013. So you have a chronological flow. Now, Bill, propose a specific sentence to add to that to deal with this so-called triangle issue.
Yeah, I want to make sure I confer with Ian. I'm trying to recall the exact year that we, it was around that window, but the exact year that we dug into that and made the determination, and this was presented to the state as an update to our site development plan. So it was a permit change, and as related to kind of the permit boundary, a reduction of that permit boundary. So eliminating that triangle. So I'll get something.
Well,
maybe we just put a placeholder in right now, Sam, that says, you know, very, very simply, available permitted airspace was reduced due to engineering issues, Republic Services to refine, or
I can
something
type.
like that.
He'll type something in.
I'll type something in. Do you want something typed in under this, under B or C?
Wherever you think it's appropriate to deal with what I'm calling the triangle issue.
Yeah, that would be B, Bill.
Okay, I see we switched those around. Yeah, I will add something after the first full sentence in B and prior to the word 20 years later.
All right, let's, Bill will just start talking when we get that. We'll come back to it. Chuck?
And so those will become two separate findings?
Yeah.
It's no longer going to be a B and a C, right? It's just going to be F2,
Number,
F2 and F2 and F3 or something like that.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Daniel, one more correction. I've got to jump in here on under B. The last sentence should read 36 years. I think there's a double cross out there. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. I was like 365, and I was like, where is it 3?
36. It's. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, Chuck, you had something specific to suggested language for either B or C?
It's just a clarification from Bill is at the end of the day, in the permitted airspace now, the triangles are not part of cells 1 through 6 or are a part of cells 1 through 6, which is the permitted stuff. That's where I'm getting confused.
So the eastern triangle that is being referenced has essentially been eliminated.
Good. So it's basically a buffer area then.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still property we own, and it used to be within our permitted footprint. However, it has been, the permitted footprint back then was reduced to eliminate that mass higher up, which would have been high up on cell 5. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we got to keep pushing here. So what's next, Daniel? We have
So generally
four
these,
versions.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, these are closely related concepts under expansion and site life. The ones that I've grouped without a space in between them are essentially the same exact finding reworded, while ones that are slightly separated, like we see D is slightly separated, they're closely related, but not a different version of the exact same finding necessarily. So I just wanted to, maybe we can handle A, B, and C first and go into it. But if anybody else has suggestions, I was just trying to capture that A, B, and C were basically identical with some caveats, while D consists of, you know, a lot of information, but it's covering information already covered in A, B, and C as well. So trying my best to capture that on paper here.
Yeah, I thought that approach was really helpful, Daniel. It was really good to be able to see them like right stacked like that. So.
Well, let's just start with Republic. Ask between A, B, and C. Is there one that is closest to your preferred model? And then I'll ask the same question of the public members. If there's one that's.
Republic Services proposes C with just that first sentence and the second sentence removed because we're just randomly pulling percentages and numbers out of thin air. I mean, I know we're trying to show an example, but I think the language in the first sentence speaks for itself. We are acknowledging that approval of an expansion does not guarantee increase in landfill life and or delay in the end of life date. So, like, I think it's just as simple, and we leave it alone. We acknowledge the intake. Although I do want to, is this server using intake limit, or did we agree on tonnage cap earlier in this discussion? I'll throw that out to Ken, Mark, and
It's
Paul.
It's tonnage cap, as I understand it, we're using.
Okay. So we would propose using letter C, changing intake limit to tonnage cap, and eliminating the second sentence. That would be our preferred wording.
Paul, what is your sense of this ABC issue?
Yeah, I understand Ginger's objection. This was my sentence. I was struggling to provide an example that folks like the commissioners could understand because it's kind of a counterintuitive problem. We face this with LU 21047. Many people believe that if an expansion was approved, the landfill life would absolutely automatically, unequivocally lengthen. We would get more life, and that is not mathematically true. So I was trying to throw in a mathematical example here. I'm not proposing any specific size in terms of a possible CUP. I just wanted an example in there. So I guess, Daniel, I'd look for feedback from you as to whether you think a numeric example is useful, or does its value overcome the objection that Republic has to this sentence?
My only thought here is I see both sides of this. I think the numerics can throw this off in terms of leaning into like an understanding about proposed expansion area or anything like that. So I'm wondering if we can accomplish the same goal by just spelling out if intake volumes increase more than the available airspace. You know, if we just left out the numerics and just spelled it out generally, this is how that could happen. I think essentially deleting the percentages would accomplish close to the same goal. And would that work for you, Ginger and Paul?
Yeah, I'm going to type something in the chat. Maybe we just simply flip it and say approval of a future landfill expansion does not guarantee an increase in landfill life or delay in the end of life date, because under the 2020 franchise agreement, the tonnage cap would be eliminated and volume could increase. I can make it sound better than that, but that's essentially what I would propose. Because I think, I mean, what I think Paul's trying to say is we could see intake volume increase, and that's going to wipe out an expansion, or could wipe out an expansion site life. And I think it says that already, but if the committee wants it spelled out more clearly, I'm happy to do that. Happy to do it. No problem.
Okay, why don't you start writing some language? Let's put a placeholder for that language. Bill, have you had a chance to get your placeholder?
You bet.
There it is.
I try to keep it generic. I don't want to get too technical here. I'm just trying to provide some clarification on why the triangle was removed. And it was really driven by updated seismic guidance as issued by the state.
All right. So any public member concerns with the turquoise text?
I think that's fine.
Okay, good to go.
I do think that we need to pay attention, because later on in the document, there's some other discussions about East and West Triangle, so that's got to be consistent. But we'll stumble upon that later.
Okay. So now let's get down to this one we're dealing with. I think Ken put something in the chat, and I think Ginger's working on it.
I put Ken's chat in the blue here under
Okay.
C.
I think he's missing an if there, but if intake volumes increase more, the overall life will decrease. Maybe it seems like there should be an if there.
Instead of will, can we say could?
It probably will if the intake volumes increase.
All right, I
I
just
know.
put mine in the chat.
All right, let's see.
Nope. He'll copy and paste that in so we have them on the screen together, so they can live in perfect harmony.
10 is the yin to my yang.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we kind of are repeating that clause of, with the intake limit eliminated.
So
If
mine
it's-
starts with the under the 2020 franchise agreement, where the little cursor is right there.
Oh, so are you proposing to replace the entire text with yours, Ginger?
I just flipped it to try to get
Okay.
at what you were talking about, Paul. I just thought that
Okay.
might be an easier way to make it sound coordinated. And you don't even need if you say if intake volumes increase, an expansion would not necessarily guarantee an increase in site life for the extension of the landfill closure date.
So I think that D is part of C, right? They're not two separate versions of it. So you would take the first.
Yeah, so what I'm saying, D would basically replace C. I just wrote D right now to try to get at the issue that Paul and I were talking about in more clearly defining how an expansion does not necessarily equate to an increase in lifespan because of volume and tonnage possibility. So all I'm doing with C is trying to get at what we were talking about. And I think Daniel just put it under D as a way to
Right.
differentiate it from what Ken wrote.
Right. So Ken, I mean, look at the line below it. Is that acceptable language to you? If the intake values increase, expansion would not necessarily guarantee. It seems like it's the same concept. Paul, do you have a solution, or Ken, if you have a?
Well, I want to dig my heels in on this one, Ginger, and normally I'm not a big fan of putting things in bold font, but this issue, this misunderstanding was crucial in LU 21047. Our commissioners didn't understand it, SWAC didn't understand it. And so that's why I still think it's critical for us to say in bold, expansion does not guarantee an increase in landfill life. It does not guarantee it.
I'm fine with putting it in bold.
Okay.
I just didn't know how to do that in the chat.
So
Yeah, I'm fine if you want to bold that. That's totally fine.
and then Daniel, take out where it says LCFTBD. It's not a separate concept. It's all going to be part of the new C. So just put your cursor in front of the word under, and just hit return right there, and it's now part of. Keep going. It's one whole thing. C is our new version.
No, the first part of C goes away now because
Right.
Ginger has rewritten it.
Yes,
I
that's
see.
correct.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything above under is gone.
I got it. Thank you.
So
Unless we're adding the last sentence there that Ken is suggesting. In other words, if an expansion increases available space, blah, blah, blah. So I think that Ginger's proposing the top part, a new language. I think we're fine with it. Now we just have Ken's suggestion that.
Well, I'm just really following up on what Paul said. I think we need to have some language which is very clear. And I don't find Ginger's version of that is as clear.
So let's put whatever the clear language is. So for now, take the sentence "in other words" and put it below the part that we've agreed to. Good, thank you. You're so good. So what specific proposals do we have to the turquoise text? Is that, Ginger, are you okay with this, or do you have a proposal?
I'm totally fine with it the way it is. Yeah, that's fine.
With the in other words text?
I would say instead, in other words, for example.
Okay.
But other than that, I'm completely fine with the concept of what Ken's proposing. So.
Are you okay with
In other
for
words,
example?
That's one scenario.
I'm fine with, for example. Also, I'd just like to have that text that we're using. I have updated text in the chat. Just a little more clear, I think.
Let them get that.
I think that's the one
Okay.
I just copied, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure if that's.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't see the update.
All right, good to go. Get rid of the other stuff, the other options here.
We're on page 3.
So we have a fair amount. This sort of stands alone here. It overlaps with some of the expansion discussion. It's a lot to work through though, because there's a lot of different concepts. I know, Chuck, this is something that you put forward. I'm just not sure how to go about going through such a big finding.
Yeah,
Okay,
you don't have to
so,
go, excuse me, you don't have to go to it right now. What I was trying to, I was looking at three different things, the how it will fold back up underneath charts and graphs and so forth. There's a lot of redundancy where taken before it was below a graph and so forth. So it's there as general information for the solid management plan, and everything else. So let's just skip over it for right now and keep it there, and we can grind through it later.
okay, well, wait a second. I'm not opposed to the general concept, but for what we have to get out, I'm just gonna be the jerk du jour here. This is not a finding in the classic sense of the term. If this 5 or 6 paragraphs are anywhere, it's in the body of the report, and then you'd have a very rolled up finding that captures it. And so if you can just for now add what you're doing, add to the body of the report. And I think we strike this out for what we give to them tonight. Any objections?
Well, that sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'll just come back to it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's in the body of the report, and then if we can agree to it, then you'll have a additional shorter finding. All right, Daniel, orient me here. It looks like we have another one of these ABC things going on.
Yeah, so this is a big one. We have several different versions of the same or similar content, but the gist is all of these talk about this sort of baseline end of life. And I just wanted to kind of orient ourselves. Some of them are using the same date. Some of them are using dates associated with other information like EPA data, I believe. So we just want to make sure that we have the same text. Generally, they're all talking about end of life between 2037 and 2039 based on the information that Republic provided as the group's quote unquote baseline end of life. So it's just a matter of how to explain it. And I think we had some suggestions on how to include this information from Paul and Ginger.
I don't think I wrote any of these, so I'll let Paul or Ken go, because I think Ken wrote a couple of them or added some addition. I think what we were trying to do was basically talk about the scenarios and then the fact that the baseline is simplified in and of itself, and there are all sorts of things swirling about, including human factors that could impact it. That's my sense. But if Paul or Ken have a preferred version and want to point that one out, maybe that's the easiest way to start. And Mark, did you write any of these? You may have a preferred.
No, Ginger, I didn't.
Well.
I didn't write anything in here. Thanks for asking.
Okay.
Yeah, Ken, I think A is your version. It seems like the most complete. I would certainly be fine with that if Republic doesn't object to it.
Yes, I did indeed write that. I think it was kind of early on, trying to kind of, I mean, we can look for, I think it would be good to use A as the model that we, or the one that we edit, and then look at the others and find out if there's information there that can be incorporated into A. For example, I'm looking at D,
Correct.
which says, based upon existing demand in the waste shed. That's an important thing.
Yep.
And that can just be integrated, perhaps replacing some language in A or being added to it. I'm not sure at this moment. But I think that would be the plan, I think, for that going forward, is to collapse them.
Yes, I'm fine with using A. I think I would maybe make a couple of adjustments. Obviously, including human factors can impact landfill site life. That's fine. It is unknown which of these factors may have been part of the baseline. None of those factors were part of the baseline. I think we all agreed on that the baseline was essentially, that. So I think that part can be removed. And then I don't think that last sentence is necessary. The blue can stay, but the one as of this writing, I don't know that we need that.
Yeah, I would agree. That again, that was just kind of a note because this was an early attempt. I think the thing that's important here, for this estimate is just to, to kind of counteract, I think, the natural human proclivity for just taking that number and kind of hanging their hat on it, and just to express the sort of complication that we feel about that number, and to identify really what assumptions have gone into that number and which ones haven't.
I'm fine with A as written now.
Okay, Ginger, in the strikeout there that starts with, but it is unknown which of these factors, if any, have been part of this baseline projection, could we just say are not included in as part of this baseline calculation? Or are not included? Yeah.
Yeah.
So Daniel, I would just say site life, comma, but are not included in this baseline calculation, just to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I don't want to lose is Ken's idea of going through the rest of these and pulling up concepts into this one so that we can, once we get those concepts in there, then we can edit the whole thing cleaner.
Yeah, so before we move on, or maybe after, if we want to get back to A, but I do have some comments about the existing demand comment in the waste shed. So we don't have to deal with it now. We can look at the other ones and then pop back. But I do have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I just want to move concepts that could be helpful into the base, which we're looking at as B, as I recall, and then we can get rid of some of this stuff and then just focus on, if you will, the new version. So are there any other concepts in these other things that need to be pulled up?
Yeah, this is Bill. I'm going to chime in here. I find E and F, there's a lot of redundant information that we state up above, and the terminology in there, speaking of permitted primary cells divided into I find that confusing. And
well, the task, Bill, the task is if it's a concept that's not going to be pulled up into our new draft, it's not going to be there at all. So don't worry about it being confusing. It'll go away.
Well, let me simplify my comment. I don't like E or F. How about that?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Let the record reflect.
I think we're generally in agreement on A, pending what Mark either wants to comment or ask about as it relates to the demand on the waste shed.
So let's go to that. Mark, you're up.
I'm muted here. It said, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Oh, my machine said I was muted. What I wanted to bring up here was that, and I don't know if it's important here, but I do think it is an important concept, and it is related to the concept of existing demand in the waste shed. And my comment is that this is often an area of confusion. And so demand in the waste shed, or I should say demand and the waste shed, or as we're calling it now, I think the service area, both of those items, demand and the service area, are completely out of control of the county. The county has no control over those things, though they're solely responsible or solely dependent on what Valley Landfills Inc. does with regard to their business development model. So the way it's written now, it feels to me like it's something that's out of Valley Landfill's control, and maybe to a certain degree, some degree of waste generation is beyond their control, but they do have an active model of building more customers. So I don't know how to get that concept in there. I'm open for a discussion and pushback from Republic if they don't agree, but I do think that it's important for people to understand, because this is often what you hear first. Why is the county taking waste from all these other counties? It's not in the county's control. And this makes it sound like it's also not in Valley Landfill's control.
I wanted to second what Mark just said. There's another finding later on that basically just says that the landfill generally chooses how much waste to accept. Trying to get to the heart of that kind of misunderstanding in the public. And I'm wondering if this is a good opportunity to roll those two concepts into this finding.
Or it could be a different finding.
Yeah, but just making sure that it's highlighted somewhere, though, I definitely agree with that.
I'll just note that
If
a lot
somebody
of
wants
that.
to propose language, go ahead, Ken. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's Ken and Ginger.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that part of that is a reliance on the passive voice, which kind of occurs throughout the document, which disguises who exactly is the agent, that's causing demand to increase, for example. So that's just a kind of general writing fix that I think can be applied throughout the document, and which is kind of a practice of good writing in general, is to just try to use the active voice more often and the passive voice less often.
So on that point, Ken, one of my half-formed or malformed thoughts is to have someone use Grammarly, that program that helps with clearer best practice writing. And that is when Millie and I did that on Subcommittee E's stuff, the most common suggestion it made was eliminating passive voice and changing to active voice. But I didn't want to go in and suggest we do that for your consideration until we stabilized the document. I think you're absolutely right that that is a problem throughout all 450 pages of our hymnal. Ginger, you're up.
I was just going to say, if somebody wanted to propose some language, conceptually, I don't have any issue with what Daniel and Mark are suggesting. I think it's fine. I'm not sure exactly how to word it.
Can we just, for now, put a parenthetical that sees finding X below? And so we know we got to tie them together, but I don't want to, I'm leery about jumping through findings and not having time to get back to them. All right, let's continue on. Can we get rid of stuff then, this B and all this other stuff and that was in there? And
So this next one's pretty straightforward. They're largely all data surrounding the lifespan associated with the site development plan, and to some extent other information like EPA data. So same sort of content as above, but using different data sources to express the end of life.
Paul?
Yeah, so I'm probably the primary culprit behind this one. And just for everybody's edification, what I'm trying to point out here is something that I discovered in conversations with DEQ that Bill was tied in on, and that is the site development plan that to the county, I think, was presented last year as the site development plan, really has limited effectivity and limited enforceability, if you will. So that's what the purpose behind this finding is, to basically say that we cannot count on the landfill life projections defined in that document. Both DEQ and Republic Services have indicated that those are really just guidance, and that's all I'm trying to say here. So if we can say that simply and succinctly, I just wanted to get that finding in because I think it will be a bit of an interesting data point for people.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree, Paul. To a certain degree, I guess your first statement under A, considered binding. At the time the document is approved by Oregon DEQ, it is binding as it ties to our approved permit to operate the landfill. Now, that said, the projected remaining capacity and life is at that time a snapshot in time, and it does not tie back to the amount of waste going into the site year over year and or the resultant density, which is an impact, of course, on remaining capacity and site life. So yes, then it gets complicated. I guess I want us to be very careful in stating that it is not binding in any way, because it is. And maybe we just state, you know, this document is, if you want to use that term, fine. Because what it really does is it locks us as the owner into a number that is referred as our remaining capacity, right? And that's our driver, is that remaining capacity. So that doesn't change until we go back to them with a modification, if there is one.
So could we say approximately 846,000 tons per year, but this volume estimate is not considered binding or controlling by either DEQ or the franchisee? I'm just trying to point out that a number was put in a site development plan, and folks like me who don't really know this business kind of took that as maybe gospel because it was an official DEQ document. And yet it turns out the reality is that was just kind of a reference term. It's not a guarantee. Is that fair?
Well, it goes back to this, to what I've said is a snapshot in time, right? It's to our knowledge, to the best of our knowledge as the owner of the facility, that is the best information we had at the time of the update of the site development plan. Now that's changed. And so, you know, providing that clarification, I think is key, but you know, I'm not arguing your point. I just want us to be careful in how we state it. That's all.
Okay. So what do you think of the way it's written now? Is that acceptable? Do we need to soften this not considered binding language? I'm flexible here. I'm just trying to make the point to our readers that they can't count on that projection in the site development plan.
Bill, I'm sorry to jump in here. I just wanted to say that site development plan that's stamped by engineers is a relevant drawings that is in the process to gain your permits since it is of design. So it's very relevant material.
Absolutely. I mean, that's our guiding engineering document. Now, you know, we have to get into more granular detail prior to constructing anything. We've got to, you know, very detail engineered the next cell that we're going to construct and have that individually approved by Oregon DEQ. And they refer back to the latest version and approval of the site development plan to check on consistency.
Okay,
And,
Yeah.
right?
So
yeah, yes, that has relevancy, Bill. I appreciate that because we look at from SWAC information too, that being kind of the reference points. And then if you have construction drawings to clarify it better, that becomes relevant also.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
we have an
I'm
agreement
okay.
on, we have an agreement on relevance. So the question is A good to go, or do we need any last second tweaks to A?
I have some language for it, which is going to hit the chat in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, it is saying that but the volume is not considered binding or controlling, but the volume it's part of the capacity of the cell. So that's kind of,
Yeah, it's the intake volume estimate that's not really binding or controlling.
Right, correct.
And
the last
DEQ made that
sentence-
clear.
Yeah, in the last sentence, Daniel, I think you added this is based on the best information available at time of approval by Oregon DEQ. I guess which can change based upon, I don't know if we want to say, what's the term we're using, waste shed impacts or whatever we want to state there.
Are we using service area or waste shed now?
Yeah,
Service area.
That's fine. That's fine.
Service area.
I mean, really what it's going to drive us as the owner is, do I have to build that next cell sooner or later? It does it get, and we evaluate that every year. We talked about that early on, but you know, we look at that on an annual basis. Does this cell potentially shift out because of a reduction in tonnage, or does it pull forward? And that's where that site development plan comes in as a guiding document.
So yeah, Daniel, I'd suggest striking in regard to these figures, because now we've made it clear that the thing that is not binding is the figure. Yeah. Does that work?
We're waiting for Ken. He's going to add something to the chat here.
No, I think you guys have settled in on it. I'm not sure that volume is right.
Right, might be intake tonnage.
We're talking about intake rate.
Yes, intake tonnage probably.
Yeah. Otherwise, seems good to me.
All right, so we're doing A. We're getting rid of B, C, and D. Can we just do a quick check here? How many of these more do we have? Because I think we're almost at our time, but we're not where we need to be. So, holy guacamole.
There's just a few more.
Okay, so I'm going to give you guys my DoorDash number and credit card PIN number so you can order lunch, dinner, and breakfast for tomorrow morning, because that's when we will finish this stuff. So let's do a quick process timeout here. I want to conduct a brief religious ceremony before we decide how the hell we're going to get through the, looks like about 25 or 30 findings. So Daniel, you're certainly closer to this document than me. So you know, any suggestions to prompt the discussion here? And I know Ken has to leave in a few minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have about 17 or 18 of like the multiple choice options. I think generally we should aim for skipping those items that are framed as standalone. And maybe folks can just send in, if they have an issue with those standalone ones, they should send it to the group and say, hey, I don't like this standalone or want revisions. But I think we should be focusing our attention to the ABCs, which I think we have 17 or 18 of those bigger discussions. I really don't have a suggestion on how to maximize our time here, unfortunately. I think we kind of have to have the discussions we've been having to get through them. But yeah, Sam, I wish I could give you a better idea how to work through this quickly. I'm not really sure.
Any other ideas from the team here on how the hell we are going to do this between now and 5 o'clock tonight?
The only other thing I can think of is if obviously offline work has to happen to get that done. The only other idea I can think of is if people literally send me their choice for which of the options to choose. The main issue with that is that we don't get to have the conversations that we've been having about integrating pieces of different versions and sort of coming up with a more well kind of combined version, which I think is going to be the solution generally for all of these. So, but the only thing I can think of as offline work is if people highlight which ones they want to keep and send those to me, and I can compile them sort of as an informal polling. But other than that, I'm not really sure how to do this offline.
Any other ideas, folks? Because I'm kind of flummoxed in the moment as to how to do this. I mean, is it, I don't know if this would work. Could we, this is a big ask, I know, and it has downsides, I appreciate. But could we ask if would people feel comfortable if Ginger, Paul, and Daniel just did the best they can to come up with something that will have all over it, you know, pending subcommittee vetting or something. But I just can't imagine giving them all these options and having any useful conversation tomorrow at the work group meeting. It just can't happen. So I know we're trying to choose between the lesser of evils here. None of these ideas are I'm saying are good. I'm just trying to get us through tomorrow evening.
This is, why don't we just, I'm in favor of giving Ginger and Paul editorial discrepancy there, just to cut and paste what they feel is relevant, because this isn't the last Alamo. We'll be going forward, but we just need somebody that has editorial capability such as Ginger to cut and paste and put some relative language to it.
With pending and draft all over, and I have no idea what Paul and Ginger's idea, and I'm not trying to preclude anyone else. I'm just trying to get the team that's been working this most closely effort just to get us through tomorrow night.
I'll do whatever.
Paul, what's
the group
your
wants.
take care, Ken. Paul, what's your dance card look like today?
Daniel, when would this have to be completed by for you to be able to get it out? Is this, you have to get your cut out at 5? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Well, I could spend a couple hours today working on this, depending on Ginger and your availability.
What time is it there? It's noon there?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's 12 o'clock your time, Paul?
Yes.
I have a couple of, I could be available after 2:30 your time for a couple hours.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
You might be able to push it to 2. I've got a couple other meetings that I have to do, but between 2 and 2:30 I can be available if that works for you and Daniel.
Okay.
Daniel, where are you on the SMMP portion of this overall findings and recommendations task, which is his other work group that he's responsible for?
Sorry, Sam, what was the question?
And in essence, do you have, look at, if we don't get this out to 7 o'clock at night, no one is going to have a seizure over it. But I know you also have SMMP work you have to do to get those findings and recommendations for the so-called 5 o'clock deadline.
Yeah, there's no disagreement in that group, so those are all good to go.
Can we substitute that group for this group and then give them this task?
Hey, don't be downgrading our group here. We're having productive conversation. Come on, buddy.
Who's the common denominator here?
Not me. I'm not on that group. Oh yeah, maybe I'm just a troublemaker. Sorry.
That's right. That's my point.
That was going to be my vote, Mark.
Yeah. Thanks for keeping up, Mark.
Exactly.
Thanks
for your support there, Ginger. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hey, we got our work done in this community education. I didn't think that was going to happen at first. So, the other Mark and Marge and we're on a roll. I think we can do it here too.
They started last and ended first. All right. So can we say, do you want to just pick a firm time, Ginger? Do you need 2:30 to be sure you can get through your stuff?
I need 2:30 to be sure. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do 2:30 to be sure. Include me on the invite, Daniel. If I have to move the deadline, Daniel and I unfortunately have had several of these getting things out at 10 o'clock at night versus 5 o'clock at night. We don't want to repeat that, but if we have to, we have to. So I think that's all we can do right now is schedule the next meeting and we can put, what we're doing at the convention and the other subcommittees is after the finding, F13, then we put bracket pending and bracket, and then to make it clear that this is not the final subcommittee recommendation on these findings or recs.
Okay, and I just had one quick ask for Paul and Ginger ahead of our check-in. Would you mind going through and sort of highlighting the option that you like the most with any added changes that you're hoping to make to it if it's not already there? So that way we can just go through. I think that would be the easiest way to get through this. So obviously we can do that during as well, but just being mindful of all of our time. And I know you probably don't have a ton of time ahead of 2:30. So if you do, that'd be great.
Okay.
All right, folks. Good work. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.